The surrender happened at 3:17 Galactic Standard Time. No battle had been fought. No fleets had exchanged fire. No worlds had burned. Yet every major news network in known space interrupted its broadcasts at exactly the same moment. Across thousands of systems, citizens looked up from factory stations, trading hubs, orbital platforms, and planetary capitals as emergency alerts flooded every public channel. Military analysts abandoned their reports. Financial exchanges froze. Government communication grids lit up with priority warnings. Because something impossible had just happened. Supreme Warlord Karen Voss, conqueror of 17 star nations and commander of the largest military empire beyond the Outer Veil, had ordered the immediate withdrawal of every vessel under his command. Entire invasion fleets were turning around. Not after defeat. Not after negotiations. Not after a threat. They were retreating from a human colony. A colony with no significant fleet. A colony with fewer than 2 million inhabitants. A colony that every military strategist in the galaxy had already written off as lost. And yet the armada was leaving. At first, many assumed the reports were false. Then the sensor feeds arrived. Hundreds of warships were abandoning formation. Carrier groups were entering jump corridors. Supply convoys were reversing course. The retreat was real. The panic started when experts realized something even stranger. Humanity had not responded. No emergency fleet had launched from Earth. No military mobilization had been detected. No classified weapons systems had been activated. No retaliation had begun. By every measurable standard, humanity had done absolutely nothing. Which raised a far more disturbing question. What had frightened Karen Voss? 3 hours later, investigator Talon Marr received a summons marked absolute priority. Talon worked for the Interstellar Oversight Directorate, a department dedicated to uncovering truths powerful governments preferred to bury. During his career, he had investigated political assassinations, military conspiracies, corporate collapses, and covert wars. Nothing in those years prepared him for the file waiting on his desk. The file contained only 2 verified facts. 48 hours earlier, Karen Voss had been fully committed to conquering the human colony. 27 minutes later, after receiving a single encrypted transmission, he had cancelled the operation. The contents of the transmission were unknown. Its sender was unknown. Its origin was unknown. Talon stared at the screen. Then he noticed something attached to the report. A handwritten note from someone with authority far above his clearance level. Only 4 words. Find out what changed. Not what he received. Not what he was told. What changed? The wording bothered him immediately. It implied that the transmission itself was not the important part. It implied that whatever Karen Voss saw had altered something inside him. Outside the station's transparent observation dome, thousands of ships crossed the darkness in orderly streams of light. Everything looked normal. But somewhere in the galaxy, the most feared warlord alive had looked at a message and abandoned an entire conquest without firing a single shot. And before the next 24 hours were over, Talon would discover that this was not an isolated event. It had happened before. Not once. Not twice. Many times. The records existed. Most had been sealed. Some had been erased. And every civilization that had encountered the truth had reached exactly the same conclusion. The galaxy feared human fleets. The galaxy respected human technology. But neither of those things explained why ancient empires still changed course whenever humanity became involved. The real reason was hidden somewhere deep in a collection of forbidden archives that no investigator had accessed in over 300 years. And for the first time in centuries, someone was about to open them. By the time Talon Marr received authorization to access the restricted records, the entire galaxy had become obsessed with a single question. What could possibly make Karen Voss retreat? The question dominated news networks, political debates, military briefings, and private conversations across hundreds of worlds. Analysts proposed secret weapons. Intelligence agencies suggested hidden alliances. Conspiracy channels claimed humanity had uncovered ancient technology capable of erasing entire star systems. None of the theories explained the facts. Because every verified report pointed toward the same impossible conclusion. Nothing had been deployed. Nothing had been threatened. Nothing had even moved. And yet the largest invasion force assembled in nearly a century had turned around and gone home. 3 days into his investigation, Talon abandoned official reports and began interviewing people who had actually dealt with humans. The results only made things worse. A retired merchant captain described humans as friendly, curious, and absurdly generous. A former military governor called them stubborn beyond reason. An elderly diplomat from a civilization older than most recorded nations spent 20 seconds staring at Talon before answering. "Never force a human to choose between comfort and principle," the diplomat said quietly. "They will surprise you every time." When Talon asked why, the diplomat refused to elaborate. That became a pattern. Everyone seemed to know something. No one wanted to explain it. A week later, Talon traveled to the archive moon of Sarin, home to one of the largest historical repositories in known space. There, buried beneath centuries of records, he found references to a phrase that appeared again and again. Not in official documents. Not in laws. Not in treaties. In private communications. Personal journals. Unclassified notes. Fragments of conversations. The phrase was always slightly different. Don't make them notice. Leave the humans alone. Not worth the risk. Move on. One entry stood out. It belonged to a military strategist who had died almost 200 years earlier. The note contained only a single sentence. "The smartest victory is avoiding the fight humanity has already decided to win." Talon reread the line 5 times. It did not make sense. Humanity had not won every conflict in galactic history. The records clearly showed defeats. Lost battles. Failed operations. Strategic mistakes. They were not invincible. Yet the fear surrounding them felt strangely different from ordinary military caution. It felt personal, as though civilizations were afraid of something beyond fleets and weapons. That same evening, Talon gained access to classified military assessments regarding human behavior. Most were heavily censored. Entire sections had been removed, names blacked out, locations deleted, outcomes hidden. Only conclusions remained. One report caught his attention immediately. Assessment 44B. Threat Evaluation, Humanity. Expected content length, 412 pages. Remaining visible content, 3 paragraphs. The final paragraph survived intact. Talon read it twice. Then a third time. Then a fourth. Human responses frequently appear delayed. This delay should not be interpreted as indecision, weakness, confusion, or inability. Historical evidence suggests that once humans reach a decision threshold, subsequent actions occur with unusual consistency and persistence. Multiple civilizations have incorrectly assumed delay indicated hesitation. Available records suggest this assumption produced severe consequences. No explanation followed. No examples were provided. The report simply ended. Talon leaned back in his chair. Outside the archive window, the stars stretched endlessly across the darkness. For the first time, he felt something that had nothing to do with curiosity. Unease. Because the report described something familiar. Not power. Not aggression. Conviction. The kind of conviction that continued moving forward after fear, doubt, and logic suggested stopping. Several hours later, another classified request finally received approval. The records concerned previous incidents involving human diplomatic crises. Talon expected dozens. There were only 9. That surprised him. Considering humanity's influence, the number seemed strangely small. Then he opened the first file. The file consisted of 2 pages. Most of it had been erased. Only the final summary remained. Civilization involved, redacted. Initial dispute duration, 11 months. Human response duration, 4 days. Final status, government dissolved. The second file was similar. Civilization involved, redacted. Initial dispute duration, 6 years. Human response duration, 9 days. Final status, administrative collapse. The third file. The fourth. The fifth. Different civilizations. Different eras. Different circumstances. Always the same pattern. Long disputes. Short endings. Talon felt a chill move through him. Because one detail appeared in every surviving record. Human fleets were rarely mentioned. Human weapons almost never appeared. The collapses seemed to happen before open warfare could even begin. As though the real battle occurred somewhere else entirely. Near midnight he reached the oldest surviving file. Unlike the others, this one contained a single and censored sentence. A sentence that immediately changed the entire investigation. The civilization in question did not lose to human strength. It lost to what the humans knew. Talon stared at the words. Then slowly looked back through every report. For the first time, a terrifying possibility emerged. What if Karen Voss had not retreated because he feared what humanity could do? What if he retreated because he had discovered what humanity already knew about him? And if that was true, what exactly had been hidden inside the transmission that made the most feared warlord in the galaxy abandon an empire's greatest conquest? The oldest records were never where historians claimed they were. That was the first lesson Talon learned after 16 days of digging through restricted archives. The second lesson was even more disturbing. Someone had been hiding information for a very long time. The files he had already reviewed were merely fragments. Summaries. Conclusions. Pieces of stories with their most important details removed. Entire centuries of context had vanished behind security barriers that predated several modern civilizations. Someone had decided the galaxy should remember the outcomes. But not the reasons. That realization led Talon deeper than he had ever gone before. 3 authorization hearings. 2 political appeals. 1 direct order from the Oversight Directorate. Only then did the final archive doors open. The room beyond was surprisingly small. No grand vault. No legendary repository. Just a quiet chamber beneath the Saren archives containing a single circular terminal and thousands of sealed records. Talon approached slowly. The terminal activated immediately. A message appeared. Access granted. Restricted historical incidents. Authorized user, Talon Mar. Warning. Materials may alter strategic risk assessments. He frowned. Historical records did not usually come with warnings. He opened the first sealed case. The civilization involved was called the Jarathi Combine. A wealthy commercial power that had dominated regional trade routes nearly 300 years ago. According to public history, the Combine collapsed because of economic instability. The classified version told a different story. The collapse began 72 hours after a trade dispute with Earth. No battles occurred. No sanctions were issued. No military action was taken. Yet somehow confidential financial records belonging to every major Combine official became public simultaneously. Corruption investigations followed. Political infighting exploded. Allied governments withdrew support. Within 4 months the Combine ceased to exist. Talon opened another file. Then another. And another. Each revealed the same impossible pattern. Humanity rarely attacked. Humanity rarely invaded. Humanity rarely threatened. Instead, crises seemed to emerge around those who challenged them. Secrets surfaced. Crimes were exposed. Hidden alliances collapsed. Internal rivalries ignited. Entire power structures suddenly found themselves facing consequences they had spent decades avoiding. The effect was devastating. Not because humans destroyed civilizations. Because they forced civilizations to confront themselves. Hours passed. The deeper Talon searched, the stranger the pattern became. One empire suffered a military mutiny after classified communications mysteriously appeared in public channels. Another collapsed when evidence of election manipulation reached its citizens. A third fragmented after centuries of hidden atrocities became impossible to conceal. Every event looked different. Yet every event began shortly after a confrontation with humanity. It was almost elegant. Terrifyingly elegant. Then Talon found something that stopped him cold. A classification label. Not a document. Not a report. Just a designation repeated across multiple archives. Protocol Janus. The name appeared dozens of times. But every attached file remained sealed. He requested access. Denied. He appealed. Denied again. He submitted a special authorization request. Denied within 4 minutes. The speed of the rejection bothered him more than the rejection itself. Someone did not want Protocol Janus examined, which meant it was probably important. Very important. Talon leaned back from the terminal and stared into the dim archive chamber. For the first time since beginning the investigation, he felt genuinely frustrated. Every path led toward the same answer, and every path ended at the same locked door. Protocol Janus. Protocol Janus. Protocol Janus. The name was everywhere. The explanation was nowhere. Then something unexpected happened. His personal communicator vibrated. Incoming priority transmission. Origin, unknown. Talon hesitated before accepting. The screen flickered. A face appeared. Gray-skinned. Weathered by time. Talon recognized him instantly. Director Emeritus Sol Varen. Former head of Galactic Strategic Intelligence. Officially retired for nearly 20 years. Unofficially one of the most respected analysts in modern history. Talon Mar, the old man said. You've been asking dangerous questions. Talon sat upright. Director Varen. Former director. You contacted me. Because you're getting close. The old man's expression carried no humor. No warmth. Only concern. Close to what? For several seconds, Varen remained silent. Then he asked a question. Tell me something, investigator. What do you think humanity's greatest strength is? Talon considered. Their persistence. No. Their adaptability. No. Their intelligence? Varen shook his head. Those matter, but they're not the reason people fear them. The old man leaned forward. Most civilizations try to understand how reality works. Talon waited. Humans try to understand how people work. The words hung in the air. Varen continued. That's the difference. Talon felt his pulse quicken. Protocol Janus. For the first time, the old man's expression changed. Not fear. Something worse. Recognition. You found the name. What is it? Varen looked away briefly, as though debating whether to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. Protocol Janus isn't a weapon. Talon frowned. What is it then? A study. The answer made no sense. A study of what? Varen looked directly into the camera. Everyone. Silence filled the archive chamber. Talon stared. What does that mean? It means, Varen said slowly, that humanity spent 2 centuries doing something no one else thought was important. His voice lowered further. They watched. The communicator crackled softly. They studied governments. They studied leaders. They studied corporations. They studied military structures. They studied economies. They studied belief systems. They studied fear. The old man paused. And eventually they became very, very good at understanding what causes powerful people to break. Talon felt a chill crawl down his spine. You're saying Protocol Janus is intelligence gathering? Varen almost laughed. No. The answer came immediately. No, investigator. Intelligence gathering is collecting information. His eyes hardened. Protocol Janus is understanding it. The archive suddenly felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Then why did Karen Voss retreat? For the first time during the entire conversation, Sol Varen looked genuinely uneasy. When he answered, his voice barely rose above a whisper. Because whatever was inside that transmission convinced him humanity already understood him. The screen went dark. Transmission terminated. Talon remained motionless. His mind raced through everything he had discovered. Every collapse. Every hidden file. Every warning. Every sealed record. And for the first time, he realized he might be asking the wrong question. The mystery was no longer why Karen Voss fled. The mystery was why someone who ruled half a sector of the galaxy was terrified of being understood. And somewhere inside the classified records of Protocol Janus, the answer was waiting. For the next 4 days, Talon barely slept. Every answer he uncovered seemed to generate 3 new questions. Protocol Janus was not a weapon. It was not an army. It was not even a strategy in the traditional sense. According to the fragments he had managed to recover, it was something far more unsettling. An understanding. A framework. A way of seeing civilizations so clearly that their future decisions became predictable. The more Talon thought about it, the less he liked it. Because military power could be measured. Economic power could be tracked. Political power could be negotiated. But what exactly were you supposed to do against someone who understood you better than you understood yourself? The question followed him through every archive chamber, every interview, every sleepless night. And then another piece of the puzzle appeared. It arrived unexpectedly through a secure intelligence channel. The source remained classified. The contents were not. For the first time, Talon received access to records concerning the actual incident that had triggered Karen Voss's retreat. He opened the file immediately. The official version claimed the Warlord's forces had intercepted a civilian convoy operating near disputed territory. The convoy consisted of 6 transport vessels, 5 cargo ships, 1 passenger ship. Nothing unusual, at least at first glance. But buried inside the detailed manifest was a list of names. 32 civilians, 26 technical specialists, 4 cultural researchers, 1 historian, 1 behavioral analyst. Talon froze. Behavioral analyst. The title appeared highlighted in the report, almost as if someone wanted him to notice it. He continued reading. The convoy had been stopped, boarded, detained. The passengers had been transferred to military custody pending investigation. No violence occurred. No injuries were reported. The entire operation followed legal procedure according to Karen Voss's government. And yet, 27 minutes after receiving a transmission, the invasion ended. Talon stared at the timeline. Something felt wrong. The passengers themselves seemed insignificant. Scientists, researchers, academics. None possessed military value. None justified the response that followed. A possibility formed slowly. He reopened the passenger list. His eyes moved across the names again, then stopped. One individual possessed a special classification. Not military. Not governmental. Strategic civilian asset. Talon frowned. The designation appeared only once. Attached to a woman named Dr. Elena Ward. Occupation. Cultural Systems Specialist. No further explanation. He immediately requested her file. Access denied. He requested it again through Oversight Authority. Denied. The third denial arrived only 30 seconds later. Someone was actively monitoring his investigation. That realization should have alarmed him. Instead, it confirmed he was moving in the right direction. People only hide information that matters. Hours later, he received another surprise. Director Emeritus Sol Varen contacted him again. This time the old intelligence chief appeared more tired than before. You found Ward. Talon sat forward. You know who she is. I know who she was. The distinction caught his attention instantly. What does that mean? Varen remained silent for several seconds. Then he spoke carefully. 20 years ago, Dr. Elena Ward helped build the first predictive social models used by Protocol Janus. Talon blinked. The first? Varen nodded. Most civilizations collect intelligence. That's what you said before. Yes. The old man folded his hands. The difference is that humans became obsessed with context. Talon listened. They wanted to know why people make decisions. Everyone studies that. No. The response came immediately. Everyone studies outcomes. Varen leaned forward. Humans studied causes. The distinction sounded subtle, but somehow felt enormous. They spent generations examining leadership behavior, political incentives, institutional weaknesses, public psychology, economic dependency, information flow, social trust. The old man's voice remained calm. They wanted to know what actually holds civilizations together. And what did they find? Varen's expression darkened. The same thing every time. Talon waited. Most civilizations believe they're held together by power. The pause. They aren't. Another pause. They're held together by belief. The words lingered. If enough people stop believing in the system, Talon began. The system dies. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Talon asked the question that had been bothering him since the beginning. If humanity understands this so well, why doesn't everyone fear them openly? Varen actually smiled. A sad smile. The same reason people don't fear gravity every second of their lives. Talon frowned. They forget it's there. The old man looked away. Karen Voss forgot. Hours after the call ended, another classified document reached Talon's terminal. This one carried no source identification whatsoever. No author. No clearance marker. No transmission path. Only a single attached image. It showed the exact message received by Karen Voss. The message that had ended the invasion. Talon's heart began beating faster. After weeks of investigation, after hundreds of files, after endless dead ends, he was finally about to see it. He opened the attachment, then stared, and stared, and stared. The message contained no threat, no demands, no warnings, no military references, only a short paragraph, short enough to fit on a single screen. Talon read it once, then again. A cold sensation spread through his chest, because suddenly he understood why Karen Voss had retreated. Not completely, but enough. The message contained details that should have been impossible for humanity to know. Private conversations, hidden financial accounts, secret negotiations, internal power struggles, personal fears, family conflicts, contingency plans. Everything. Not about the Empire. About Karen Voss himself. The message ended with a single sentence. We believe you are intelligent enough to make the correct decision. No threat. No ultimatum. No countdown. No intimidation. Just certainty. Absolute certainty. Talon sat frozen. For the first time since beginning the investigation, he realized something terrifying. Humanity had not convinced Karen Voss to retreat. They had reminded him that they already knew exactly who he was. And somewhere deep inside Protocol Janus existed the answer to an even more frightening question. How many other leaders in the galaxy had received messages like that without anyone ever finding out? Talon did not leave the archive chamber for 11 hours. The message remained open on his screen the entire time. Not because it was long. Because it was short. Painfully short. A few paragraphs. One closing sentence. Nothing more. And yet it had ended a war before it began. That was the detail he could not stop thinking about. History was filled with threats. History was filled with ultimatums. History was filled with demonstrations of force. But this message contained none of those things. It simply described Karen Voss with frightening accuracy. His hidden political alliances. His secret succession concerns. The commanders he no longer trusted. The ministers plotting against him. The private contingency plans he had never shared with anyone. The information was not merely correct. It was intimate, as though someone had spent years studying him, as though someone understood the architecture of his life. And somehow that had been enough. Talon replayed the sequence repeatedly. One message. 27 minutes. Retreat. No rational military model explained it. Then a realization struck him. For weeks he had been asking why Karen Voss fled. Maybe that was the wrong question. Maybe the real question was why he fled so quickly. The answer came 2 days later. A sealed authorization finally arrived. Level Omega. Rarely granted. Almost never issued to investigators. The authorization opened a section of Protocol Janus that had remained inaccessible for over a century. Talon activated the files immediately. The first document was not a strategic report. It was a lecture, recorded nearly 200 years earlier by one of the original architects of the program. A human woman sat before a classroom, gray-haired, ordinary. Not the kind of person one would associate with a system feared across the galaxy. Her opening sentence made Talon stop breathing for a moment. Most civilizations prepare for war by studying weapons. The lecturer smiled slightly. We prepared by studying people. The recording continued. Human researchers had spent generations collecting data. Not military data. Human data. Alien data. Behavioral data. Psychological data. Political data. Cultural data. Every decision. Every incentive. Every recurring pattern. For 2 centuries they observed, listened, compared, tested, refined. Not because they expected conflict. Because they wanted understanding. Then the lecture reached its central point. The woman stood beside a holographic model of a government. Thousands of connections appeared. Relationships. Dependencies. Loyalties. Financial structures. Social trust networks. Information systems. Political pressure points. The entire civilization glowed like a living organism. Every society, she said, has structural weaknesses. The hologram shifted. Several connections disappeared. The entire model began collapsing. Most governments spend their existence trying to hide them. Another shift. More systems failed. Soon the entire structure fell apart. Then the woman delivered the sentence that changed everything. The fastest way to defeat an enemy is not attacking their strength. Talon leaned closer. It is revealing the consequences of their weaknesses. Silence filled the archive. For the first time, he understood what Protocol Janus truly was. Not espionage. Not intelligence gathering. Not even strategy. It was diagnosis. Humanity had learned to examine civilizations the way doctors examine patients. They identified hidden fractures before anyone else noticed them. They mapped vulnerabilities, predicted reactions, understood motivations. And when conflict came, they did not attack. They applied pressure exactly where reality was already cracking. The realization hit with shocking force. The civilizations from the historical files had not been destroyed by humans. They had been destroyed by themselves. Humanity had simply shown them where they were broken. Hours later, Talon uncovered the first complete Janus operation ever recorded. The target had been an empire called the Vey Consortium. Public history described its fall as an economic crisis. The classified version was astonishing. Human analysts spent 18 years studying the consortium. 18 years. Not planning an invasion. Studying. Learning. Understanding. When conflict eventually emerged, humanity did not launch fleets. They released evidence. That was all. Evidence of corruption. Evidence of fraud. Evidence of internal manipulation. Every revelation was true. Every accusation documented. Every fact verifiable. The empire collapsed within 90 days. Not because humans destroyed it. Because millions of citizens suddenly saw reality clearly. Talon sat motionless. The implications were staggering. A military defeat could be recovered from. Economic losses could be rebuilt. Even destroyed worlds could eventually heal. But what happened when an entire civilization lost faith in its own foundations? That damage ran deeper. Far deeper. Then another file opened automatically. Current status report. Target, Karen Voss. Protocol stage 1 complete. Talon's stomach tightened. The report was recent. Very recent. The date was less than 48 hours old. He read quickly. Human analysts had been studying Karen Voss for 22 years. 22. Not since the invasion began. Not since tensions increased. 22 years. Long before anyone imagined the current crisis. Long before the colony existed. Long before most intelligence agencies considered him important. Humanity had already mapped his empire. His leadership structure. His economy. His command hierarchy. His personal psychology. His fears. His ambitions. Everything. The transmission had not been a warning. It had been proof. Proof that humanity already understood him completely. The message showed Karen Voss something terrifying. Not human power. Human preparation. For 22 years he believed he was building an empire. For 22 years humanity had been quietly studying it. And according to the report, Stage 1 had only required demonstrating awareness. Talon's eyes moved to the next section. Protocol Janus operational sequence. Stage 1, awareness. Stage 2, exposure. Stage 3, Consequence. Stage 4, Resolution. He stared at the screen. Then slowly reread the stages. Awareness. Exposure. Consequence. Resolution. The report ended abruptly. Everything beyond Stage 1 remained classified. But one detail was impossible to ignore. Karen Voss retreated before Stage 2 began, which meant whatever came next was significantly worse. Far worse. And somewhere inside the hidden sections of Protocol Janus existed the reason entire civilizations feared reaching Stage 2. Talon expected Stage 2 to be classified. He did not expect it to be feared. That distinction became clear 3 hours later. The deeper he searched through historical Janus records, the more unusual the access patterns became. Analysts, military officers, diplomats, intelligence directors, people who routinely reviewed dangerous information, had repeatedly opened Stage 1 files. Very few opened Stage 2. Almost nobody opened Stage 3. And those who did often left personal annotations behind. Not technical observations. Warnings. One note simply read, "If Stage 2 has begun, the outcome is already determined." Another was even shorter. "Pray they stop at exposure." Talon stared at the comments. The authors represented different species, different centuries, different governments. Yet somehow they had reached the same conclusion. Something about Stage 2 frightened experienced leaders more than military annihilation. The answer arrived sooner than expected. Not from the archives. From reality. Karen Voss's empire began to change. At first, the changes appeared unrelated. A banking consortium unexpectedly suspended operations. 3 senior ministers resigned within 12 hours of one another. Several military procurement contracts vanished from public databases. News agencies reported growing unrest in outer sectors. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing dramatic. Individually, each event seemed manageable. Collectively, they formed a pattern. Talon noticed it immediately, because he had spent weeks studying historical collapses. This was how every one of them started. Quietly. The following day, intelligence networks reported another development. A classified communication archive belonging to one of Voss's closest advisors had been leaked. No one claimed responsibility. No source could be identified. Every document proved authentic. The revelations spread through the empire with astonishing speed. Political rivals seized the opportunity. Investigations opened. Accusations multiplied. Public trust began to erode. Still no human fleets appeared. Still no threats were issued. Still no retaliation was announced. And somehow that made everything worse. The galaxy understood war. War had rules. Objectives. Timelines. Visible enemies. This felt different. This felt like watching a mountain crack from the inside. Talon spent the next several days monitoring developments. Each report increased his unease. A major industrial world announced temporary production shutdowns. 2 governors publicly questioned central leadership. Military commanders began requesting clarification regarding succession authority. Investors moved assets off-world. Trade partners delayed negotiations. The empire remained standing. But it no longer looked stable. It looked nervous. Then came the event that changed everything. A confidential meeting transcript surfaced across hundreds of communication networks simultaneously. The meeting involved Karen Voss himself. The recording was genuine. Verified by every intelligence agency that examined it. Its contents were devastating. Not criminal. Not treasonous. Something worse. Human. The transcript revealed uncertainty. Private concerns he had spent decades hiding from allies and rivals alike. For the first time, citizens saw the man behind the myth. The effect was immediate. The image of invincibility cracked. Not shattered. Cracked. And that was enough. Talon remembered something from the Janus lecture. Every civilization is held together by belief. Watching the reports arrive, he finally understood what the instructor meant. Power was not the foundation. Perception was. Belief was. Confidence was. Remove enough of it and the structure began collapsing under its own weight. No armies required. No bombardments necessary. Only truth. A dangerous amount of truth. 3 days later, Talon received another secure transmission. This one originated from Sol Varen. The retired intelligence director looked older than before. Not physically. Emotionally. As though he recognized where events were heading. You've seen the reports. Talon nodded. Stage 2. Varen sighed. Yes. It isn't an attack. No. It's exposure. Correct. Talon folded his arms. They aren't creating weaknesses. Varen's expression hardened. No. They're revealing existing weaknesses. Exactly. The old man leaned forward. And that's why Janus works. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally Talon asked the question that had been bothering him. Why does humanity invest decades preparing for this? Varen gave an answer Talon did not expect. Because they hate using it. The investigator blinked. What? They hate it. The old man's voice carried absolute certainty. Humanity considers Janus a failure. Talon stared. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. Varen shook his head slowly. You've misunderstood the purpose. Talon waited. The objective isn't collapse. The answer arrived quietly. The objective is prevention. The words lingered. Then why continue? Because some people refuse to stop. Varen looked away briefly. When diplomacy fails, when warnings fail, when negotiations fail, Janus exists to ensure consequences reach the people responsible. The conversation ended shortly afterward, but one sentence remained in Talon's mind. The objective isn't collapse. It's prevention. For the first time, he began seeing the historical records differently. Humanity never seemed eager to act. Never rushed. Never escalated quickly. The timelines stretched across years. Sometimes decades. Janus wasn't designed for revenge. It was designed as a final measure. A last resort. That realization should have been comforting. Instead, it made everything more terrifying. Because if humanity had already reached stage 2, then someone had already exhausted every earlier option. That evening, a classified alert appeared on Talon's terminal. Priority: critical. Subject: Karen Voss. Status update. His eyes moved quickly across the report, then stopped. For several seconds, he simply stared, unable to look away. Because according to the latest intelligence assessment, the Warlord's empire had crossed a threshold. The analysts no longer considered instability a possibility. They considered it inevitable. And buried near the bottom of the report was a sentence that sent a chill through him. Stage 3 authorization conditions approaching. Talon slowly leaned back in his chair. The room suddenly felt colder. Stage 1 had forced awareness. Stage 2 had revealed weakness. And now, for the first time, he realized humanity had never actually needed to threaten Karen Voss. The real threat had always been whatever happened after exposure. Whatever happened during consequence. And judging by the fear hidden inside centuries of historical records, the galaxy had very good reasons to dread Stage 3. The first empire-wide riots began 17 hours after Stage 3 authorization conditions were met. Not because humanity released another document. Not because a fleet appeared over a major world. Not because anyone issued demands. The riots began because millions of citizens suddenly started asking questions. Questions their leaders could no longer answer. Questions that should have been simple. Where had public funds gone? Why had promised reforms never happened? Why had military spending increased while infrastructure declined? Why had certain officials become impossibly wealthy? Why had information been hidden for decades? Questions spread faster than any virus. And unlike a virus, questions became stronger when people tried to suppress them. Across Karen Voss's empire, trust began evaporating. Governors blamed ministers. Ministers blamed advisors. Advisors blamed intelligence agencies. Intelligence agencies blamed regional authorities. Everyone searched desperately for an enemy. The problem was that humanity was nowhere to be found. There were no invasions. No cyberattacks. No sabotage operations. No visible aggression. Only consequences. The same consequences that had always been waiting beneath the surface. Talon watched events unfold from the Oversight Directorate's Central Command Center. Entire walls displayed live updates from across the galaxy. Every hour brought new developments. Another resignation. Another investigation. Another public scandal. Another military commander distancing himself from central authority. Each event looked small in isolation. Together they resembled a dam slowly collapsing under pressure. Then something unexpected happened. Karen Voss himself requested a public address. The announcement stunned political observers. The Warlord had spent most of his career cultivating an image of absolute confidence. He rarely appeared without carefully controlled messaging. He certainly never addressed crises directly. Yet now he intended to speak. The transmission attracted record viewership. Billions watched. Talon watched. Entire governments watched. Even human observers reportedly tuned in. When Karen Voss finally appeared on screen, the reaction was immediate. He looked older. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying a weight no one else could see. For several seconds he simply stared into the camera. Then he spoke. "My people deserve honesty." The statement alone sent shockwaves through intelligence circles. Because honesty was not the language powerful rulers used when they felt secure. It was the language they used when they ran out of alternatives. The speech continued. He admitted mistakes. Acknowledged corruption. Accepted responsibility for failures within his administration. Promised investigations. Promised reforms. Promised accountability. The words sounded sincere. For a brief moment, observers believed the crisis might stabilize. Then the speech ended. And within 30 minutes, 3 regional governors announced independent reviews of central authority. The damage had already gone too far. Talon understood why immediately. Belief was easier to lose than regain. The Empire no longer trusted itself. That trust could not be restored through a single speech. Not after years of hidden fractures. Not after Stage 2. 3 days later, another classified report reached Talon's desk. Priority Omega. Eyes only. The report contained exactly one item. The complete contents of the transmission sent to Karen Voss. Not the shortened version. Not the partial excerpt. The entire message. Talon opened it immediately. At first glance it seemed almost disappointingly simple. No threats. No demands. No military references. No mention of Protocol Janus. Only facts. Page after page of facts. Private decisions. Hidden relationships. Undisclosed transactions. Strategic calculations. Psychological assessments. Every secret Karen Voss believed belonged exclusively to him. Human analysts had documented all of it. Not approximately. Precisely. The report even predicted several decisions he had not yet made. Talon felt a growing sense of disbelief. The level of understanding was extraordinary. But it was the final page that truly shook him. The last section contained a single paragraph. Humanity had not sent evidence proving they could destroy his empire. They had sent evidence proving they already understood how it would destroy itself. The distinction changed everything. For nearly a minute Talon sat motionless. Then he finally understood why Karen Voss retreated within 27 minutes. Not because he feared human power. Not because he feared human fleets. Not because he feared human technology. He feared certainty. The terrifying realization that someone else understood the future trajectory of his empire better than he did. And worse, they had been correct so far. Every prediction contained in the transmission had come true. Every one. The riots. The resignations. The scandals. The political fragmentation. All predicted. All documented. All unfolding exactly as forecast. Humanity had not threatened him. They had shown him the future. A future already moving toward him. A future they understood because they understood him. Talon leaned back slowly. Outside the command center windows, stars drifted across the darkness. For weeks he had believed Protocol Janus was humanity's greatest strategic achievement. Now he realized something far more unsettling. Janus was merely the tool. The real power was the thing behind it. The thing every historical record hinted at. The thing every frightened civilization eventually discovered. Humanity's greatest strength was not intelligence. It was understanding. And somewhere beyond the classified reports, beyond the archives, beyond the collapsing empire of Karen Voss, a final truth remained unanswered. One question. One mystery. If humans understood civilizations this well, why did they spend so much effort trying to save them before deciding to expose them? The answer arrived 2 weeks later. Not in a classified report. Not in an intelligence briefing. Not through some hidden archive buried beneath centuries of secrecy. It arrived through a message. A simple request transmitted from Earth to the Oversight Directorate. Human representatives wished to meet. Nothing more. By then, Karen Voss's empire still existed. Technically, its borders remained intact. Its fleets still operated. Its government still functioned. But everyone understood the truth. The empire that had existed before the transmission was gone. Something else was emerging in its place. Something uncertain. Something forced to confront realities it had spent decades avoiding. And remarkably, humanity had still done nothing beyond revealing the truth. No invasions. No occupations. No demands for surrender. No conquest. Talon found that fact increasingly difficult to ignore. Which was why he accepted the invitation. 3 days later, he arrived at a human diplomatic complex orbiting Earth. The station itself was surprisingly ordinary. No intimidating defenses. No displays of military power. No symbols announcing dominance. Just people working, talking, building, living. The simplicity felt almost absurd after everything he had learned. A civilization capable of reshaping empires from across the galaxies seemed strangely uninterested in proving how powerful it was. The meeting took place in a small conference room overlooking Earth. Blue oceans. White clouds. A world that looked peaceful enough to be forgotten. Waiting for him was an elderly woman. Human. Gray-haired. Talon recognized her immediately. She was one of the original architects of Protocol Janus. The same woman whose lecture had changed his understanding of the entire crisis. She smiled as he entered. "You've been busy." Talon sat down. People tend to get busy when empires collapse. The woman laughed softly. "Fair." For several moments neither spoke. Then Talon asked the question that had followed him for months. "Why?" The woman tilted her head. "Why what? Why spend centuries understanding other civilizations?" He leaned forward. "Why create Protocol Janus at all?" The answer came without hesitation. "Because we failed." Talon blinked. The response surprised him. "Failed?" The woman nodded. "Repeatedly." She looked toward Earth below. "For most of our history, we believed force solved problems." Her voice remained calm. "We fought wars. We toppled governments. We defeated enemies." The pause. "And afterward the same problems returned." Talon listened carefully. "Eventually we realized something." The woman folded her hands. "You can't permanently solve a problem you don't understand." Silence settled between them. Then she continued. "We studied civilizations because we wanted to know why they break. We studied leaders because we wanted to know why they make destructive choices. We studied societies because we wanted to know what keeps them healthy." Her expression softened slightly. "And we discovered something uncomfortable." Talon already suspected the answer. That most collapses begin internally. "Exactly." The woman nodded. "External threats matter far less than internal failures." She looked directly at him. "Corruption. Fear. Dishonesty. Greed. Short-term thinking. Loss of trust. Those destroy more civilizations than fleets ever will." Talon sat quietly. The statement matched everything he had seen. Every historical collapse. Every Janus operation. Every hidden record. The woman continued. "People assume Janus exists to destroy governments." A faint smile appeared. "It doesn't." "Then what does it do?" Her answer came immediately. It gives them one final opportunity to save themselves. The room became very still. Talon remembered stage 1. Awareness. Then stage 2. Exposure. Then stage 3. Consequence. Suddenly the sequence looked different. Not like punishment. Like warning. Like escalation. Like chance after chance after chance. Until nothing remained. Karen Voss was given a choice. The woman nodded. Several. He ignored them. Several times. Talon exhaled slowly. And if he hadn't retreated? For the first time, the woman looked genuinely sad. Then his empire would have continued collapsing. No military action? No. No invasion? No. No retaliation? The woman shook her head. We already knew where the road ended. A long silence followed. Outside the window, sunlight moved slowly across Earth's oceans. Finally Talon understood. The galaxy had misunderstood humanity for centuries. They feared human strength, human technology, human persistence. Those things mattered, but they weren't the reason civilizations changed course when humans became involved. The real reason was much simpler. Humanity refused to look away from reality. No matter how uncomfortable it became, no matter how expensive, no matter how painful. And once they saw the truth, they acted on it with a consistency that terrified everyone else. Not because they were fearless, but because they had learned long ago that fear was not a reason to stop. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As Talon prepared to leave, the woman offered one final thought. A lot of civilizations think our greatest weapon is information. She smiled. They're wrong. Talon paused. What is it then? The woman looked toward the blue world below. Consequences. Then she laughed softly. More specifically, helping people meet the consequences they spent years avoiding. Months later, Talon completed his final report. It became one of the most widely distributed documents in modern galactic history. The closing paragraph was short. Very short. Perhaps because some lessons become clearer when stated simply. The report read, "The galaxy believes humanity wins because it is powerful. This is incorrect. Humanity wins because it understands. It studies. It listens. It prepares. And when the moment arrives, it refuses to ignore reality. That is why civilizations fear them. Not because humans destroy what they touch. Because they reveal what was already breaking and give it no place left to hide." Years later, when students studied the fall of Karen Voss's empire, they would focus on the riots, the scandals, the resignations, the political collapse. They would miss the most important moment, the moment that actually changed history. The moment a warlord opened a message and realized humanity already understood him. And in that instant he understood himself. That was enough. Because some battles are won by force. And some are won when the truth becomes impossible to escape. Humanity had learned the difference. The rest of the galaxy was still catching up.